Hi everyone, it's William on a hot July day. I think about 34 degrees here. So yeah, a scorcher. But today we are with Dmitri in 1915, just outside of Moscow in the deep snow with skiing activity going on. So maybe that will cool us down a little bit. Our recap, very interesting conclusion of the Grunwald letter, where it becomes clear that Grunwald and undoubtedly other people really want and need Dmitri to step up and be an alternate head of the family, an alternate to Vladimir Kirillich. And so yeah, it was the situation that Dmitri had always longed for, but two things had happened since then. He'd become less interested in the emigration, and in less interested. I shouldn't say less interested in Russia, because that's not really the case, but yeah, not so gung-ho about the Soviet Union and what was being done there, as far as, for instance, technological accomplishments under Stalin. Okay, so the other thing was that he was dying, essentially. He would have had, let's see, in June, he probably would have had, maybe 3 months, 2.5 months to live if he hadn't gone to the sanatorium. So it's hard to imagine, him, how he must have felt physically, night sweats and fever and just worn out. And, Grunwald talked about how he was, for some unknown reason, probably personal, lingering in the south of France. And I would think it was just because, of his health, of his physical state. Okay, in 1915, our last diary entry, yeah, pretty simple, talking about this book about ancient Egypt, saying he doesn't like it, and also feeling very frustrated about chess. Okay, our cast today, well, Maria and Paul are not present, Grand Duke Paul that is, but they are mentioned. So it's a nice simple one, not a short one particularly, but a nice simple one. Here we go. It's 22nd of January / 4th February, Usovo, 5 degrees below zero, windy but clear. I got up, as always, around 11 o'clock. I slept all right, but I've begun waking up early in the morning and then sleeping until 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. I feel a little better in the mornings than I did before. I wanted to go outside and did go outside, but after skiing a little, I went home. Even though the weather's clear, it's windy. I lunched à deux with GM at 1 o'clock, after which we read the newspapers and sat down to play chess. Naturally, I lost, because I'm terrible at it. I went outside around 4 o'clock. I skied through the park, or more accurately, I say that in Russian because I'm not sure what he means about that. It's like in the tracks in the park or something like that. If you are a native Russian speaker, and you can fine-tune that for me, I would appreciate it. So, по его следам, and Ivo referring to the park. I went to Parnassus. There's so much snow everywhere that it's extremely difficult to take a walk. At 5 o'clock, I returned home and had tea with GM, after which I sat down to read The Iron Chancellor of Ancient Egypt. It's quite interesting. I read right up until dinner time, which I had adieu with GM at 8 o'clock. Afterwards, I wrote a letter to Papa. I heard from Maria that he was unwell. I asked how he was feeling. Then I sat down with GM to play chess. I lost again. We had tea at 12 o'clock, so midnight. The war news isn't bad. We're succeeding everywhere. Oi, Dmitri. Yeah, the war news. Well, Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay, so GM is not the physically active person that Cook is. You know, he does, as we know, he goes out on walks with Dmitri, and sometimes even on skis or sliding down the hill, but it's really not his thing. And it wasn't either when Dmitri was a child, and other people Velter or Cook would take Dmitri out for his physical exercise. Yeah, I almost think of the 5 stages of grief over chess, because, you know, he's gone through various things, right? Last time, in the last diary entry, it was, well, I just haven't played for a while and I'm not used to it. And today he's say, well, I'm bad at it. You know, so yeah, that's pretty clear, unless GM was some kind of grandmaster. I haven't been counting the number of games that they've played now, but Dmitri hasn't won a single game, and it's been what, maybe 3 days, and they've been playing every day, sometimes once a day, sometimes more. So, but he keeps going, you know. I give him credit for that. I probably would have said, okay, I'm done with this, we'll play something else. But yeah, he wants to win, boy. So he keeps going. All right, Parnassus. Well, obviously Dmitri did not go to Greece. This was a hill, I guess, on the property that he crossed the park to get to. Well, his mother had been Greek, of course, well, Danish Greek, but she'd been born and raised in Greece and spoke Greek, so maybe she was the source of that nickname. I don't think this is the Ice Mountain. I think it's a different hill on the estate, but I don't know. So now he's finding the book interesting. You know, he persevered with that as well. In the last diary entry, he told us he didn't really like it. Well, specifically that it was not interesting, that was why he didn't like it, but now he's finding it interesting. So much so that he sat down and read for, it sounds like, about 2.5 hours. When was the last time I did that? Gosh, I might have done it yesterday. I'm reading now for maybe the 3rd or 4th time Thomas Mann's book, Joseph and His Brothers. Yeah, so that's also about ancient Egypt, but very, very different book, I'm sure. And yeah, I was really into it yesterday. So I read, I don't know if it was 2.5 hours, all at one sitting. Anyway, I am the king of going off on tangents. Let's see, yes, this war news. Well, he's being quite detached about that, just as he would if, say, for instance, there was a war in some other part of the world that didn't involve Russia. Almost, not quite, because he does refer to us, that we're doing not bad. Well, no, yeah, what the war news isn't bad, but we're succeeding everywhere. Well, you know, he's not really contributing to that, is he? So we'll see what, you know, he had, all power to him, he'd been right in the thick of it. But right now he wasn't, and he didn't seem to feel bad about that, and maybe he wasn't letting himself think about that, because that was what Dmitri did when there was something that threatened his mental equilibrium. He just, you know, didn't think about it. So what was going on in the war? Well, I asked AI about that. There was the Carpathian campaign to take mountain passes, and apparently that was being very, very fiercely fought. The Russians against the Austrians primarily, and it was, yeah, just fierce fighting with lots of casualties on both sides. In East Prussia, which may have been primarily what he was referring to, that was where he himself had fought. There had been the retreat in 1914 of the Russian forces, this headlong retreat from the Germans, and apparently the Germans had pushed the Russian forces all the way to the Russian border, but now the Russians were succeeding in pushing them back from the border. So that was definitely good news at the moment. In the Caucasus, the Russian troops had repelled a Turkish offensive and were going on the offensive themselves and pushing into the Ottoman Empire, so that also was good news. So I guess those were the things that he was reading. Later on in his life, when he was at the sanatorium and other places, he would tell us what newspapers he was reading, but in this instance, unfortunately not. He does use the plural, though. So what do we have next time? Well, we have, in 1939, the Candide interview. Apparently, it was the lesser of the two interviews. It was not as incendiary. It wasn't the one that upset everybody. That was the other one that was published in several papers and that Kazım Bek put out there in his own Young Russia Party publication so that other people in the immigration saw that. And were shocked by it. Okay, so, but anyway, still, I have the text of the Candide interview, so we're going to look at that when we go back to 1939. And 1915, when we return to that, well, you won't be surprised to hear that we have more news about the book and about chess. But this time, we also have the ballerina whom Dmitri was waiting so anxiously to hear from, Alexandra Balashova. Her name will be coming up. I won't spoil that one. And he will be also on the eve of departure for Moscow, and very happy about that. So when we return after the next video, when we return to 1915, we'll be in the midst of a very eventful few days in Moscow. So yeah, good stuff, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.